By
This
dawn,
place
that
is
kiss would cost her
wild.
everything.
Not as wild as you.
And buy her something
To a
she
wild
never
night.
asked for. The bass inside Velvet Room hit like a heartbeat you couldn't control. Lights strobed across glass and gold, turning sweat into glitter and strangers into silhouettes. The air smelled like expensive perfume, bourbon, and the kind of danger that only feels like fun when you don't recognize it yet. Zuri told herself she came here for something normal. One night of laughter, one night of noise, one night where she could forget how heavy life felt in a city that didn't know what to do with a black woman who refused to shrink. Her girls were already tipsy, already loud, already leaning into the night like it owed them joy. "You've been staring at him," Mina teased, nudging Zuri's shoulder with a grin sharp enough to cut. Zuri didn't deny it. She shouldn't have looked twice. She shouldn't have looked once. But he sat in the darkest section of the VIP area like the shadow of a man, calm in a way that made everyone else in the room look like they were pretending. No friends leaning in his space. No woman perched on his lap. No board scrolling on his phone. Just a glass of something amber, untouched, and a gaze that didn't wander. Like he'd already seen every version of this room and found none of it worth reacting to. He didn't wear flashy jewelry. He didn't need to. His suit wasn't loud, but it was perfect, tailored like it belonged to his skin. Black on black. Clean lines. A watch that didn't sparkle, it warned. Zuri's throat tightened when his face turned slightly toward the crowd and the light caught him for half a second. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that didn't look like it knew how to smile, eyes so dark they didn't reflect anything. Not excitement. Not interest. Not mercy. "I'm not staring," Zuri lied, taking a sip of her drink like it could steady the rhythm under her ribs. Mina laughed, then leaned closer, lowering her voice like she was about to start a fire. "Okay. Dare." Zuri blinked. "What?" Mina's grin widened. "Kiss him." The words landed like a slap wrapped in velvet. Zuri's first instinct was to laugh it off, to shake her head, to call Mina crazy. But the whole table turned toward her like they'd been waiting. Phones came out. Eyes gleamed. Someone chanted her name, playful and drunk. "No. Absolutely not," Zuri said, but her voice was weaker than she meant it to be. "Come on," another friend urged. "One kiss and we'll all shut up about your mysterious crush forever." Zuri's gaze flicked back to the man in the dark. The coldest man in the room. The one the staff avoided. The one nobody accidentally bumped into. The one who didn't move when laughter exploded around him. It wasn't attraction that pulled her. Not really. It was something more reckless. A stubborn part of her that hated the way the city treated her, like she should always be careful, always grateful, always quiet. She was tired of being careful. She was tired of being told she didn't belong in rooms like this. And if fear was what kept everyone else away from him, then fine. Let fear watch her do something stupid. She set her glass down. Her friends gasped. "Zuri!" Mina started, but Zuri was already standing. The floor felt like it shifted under her heels as she walked, not because she was drunk, but because the air changed. She cut through the crowd, shoulders back, chin lifted. People glanced at her, then looked away too fast. It was like the room didn't want to be caught witnessing what she was about to do. Security at the VIP entrance saw her coming. One of them stepped forward on instinct, but before he could speak, a single glance from the man in the shadows stopped him. Not a word. Not a gesture. Just a look that said no. Zuri's stomach flipped. Her pulse thudded hard enough to bruise. She kept going anyway, walking into the dark section like she owned it, like she didn't feel the weight of every eye behind her. Close, he was worse. Not louder. Not scarier in the obvious way. Worse in the quiet way. His presence pressed against her skin like a threat disguised as calm. His gaze lifted to her face slowly, as if he was deciding whether she was real or a mistake. Zuri forced a smile she didn't feel. "Hi," she said, voice bright, stupidly normal. He didn't answer. The silence stretched until it became a wall. Zuri leaned in before her courage could evaporate, before her brain could catch up and save her. She placed a hand on the edge of his table, steadying herself, then tilted her head and kissed him. It lasted one heartbeat. maybe 2. But the second her lips touched his, the world shifted. He didn't kiss back. He didn't pull away either. He stayed perfectly still, like a statue that could bleed. Zuri's stomach dropped. The kiss wasn't soft. It wasn't romantic. It was like touching the edge of something sharp and realizing too late it had been waiting for skin. She pulled back fast, breath caught, cheeks burning. She laughed awkwardly, already turning to leave, already regretting everything. And that was when the entire bar went silent. Not gradually. Not like the music faded. Like someone had cut the oxygen. The bass kept pounding but nobody moved with it. Glasses paused midair. A waitress froze beside a table. Even the drunk laughter died like it had been strangled. Zuri turned her head, confused, and saw faces she'd never noticed before. Men in suits, eyes hard, hands near their jackets. She saw the bartender staring like he'd seen a ghost. She saw security shifting positions, subtle, deliberate. She saw Mina's smile vanish at the table across the room, her mouth falling open. And in the center of it all, the man she'd kissed finally moved. He stood, lowly, gracefully, like the room belonged to him and he'd simply decided to remind everyone. His chair didn't scrape. It didn't make a sound. His eyes stayed on Zuri as if she was the only thing that mattered now. Then his hand shot out. Not rough. Not frantic. Controlled. He caught her wrist the moment she tried to step away. Fingers closing like a cuff. Zuri sucked in a breath. His grip was warm. Unforgiving. Possessive in a way that made her skin prickle. He leaned close enough that she could smell his cologne. Clean, expensive, and something darker underneath. His voice was low, calm, almost polite. But it wasn't a request. Do it again. Zuri's laugh came out too high, too thin, like her body was trying to pretend her fear was humor. Okay, she said, tugging once at her wrist, testing him the way you test a locked door even when you already know it won't open. That was the dare. I did it. We're done. He didn't loosen his grip. He didn't even blink. His eyes held her face with a kind of still attention that didn't feel like desire. Felt like inspection. Like he was looking for seams. Like he could see the lie behind her smile before she even decided what it was. Around them, the silence stayed heavy. The music kept playing, but it sounded distant now, like the bar was underwater. Zuri became aware of movement. Quiet, controlled, shadows sliding into place. 2 men stepped closer from the VIP edge. Another appeared by the hallway that led to the restrooms. One more near the entrance. Nobody announced themselves. Nobody made a scene. They simply existed closer than they should. The kind of men who didn't need to raise their voices to change the rules. Zuri swallowed. Sure. I'm sorry if I. His mouth twitched, not a smile. Something colder. You're not sorry, he said. His voice was smooth, almost bored, but it hit like the click of a gun being readied. You're calculating. Zuri's eyes widened. She forced a scoff like she was offended. Like she wasn't shaking inside. Calculating what? I don't even know you. His gaze dropped to her wrist, where his thumb rested over her pulse like he could feel every panic spike. Then he looked back up. That's the part one don't believe. Zuri's friends stood frozen across the room, their faces pale under the neon. Mina had her hand half raised as if she wanted to call Zuri back, but fear pinned her in place. A server tried to edge away from a nearby table, and one of the suited men shifted just enough to block him. No touch, no shove. Just a silent reminder. Not now. Zuri's breath became shallow. Let go, she whispered, and hated how small it sounded. He leaned in closer. Not intimate. Not gentle. Strategic. Like he wanted her to understand this was not flirting. Do you know, he murmured, how many people in this city dream of touching me just to prove they survived it? Zuri's lips parted, but she had nothing. Her bravado drained so fast she could almost feel it leaving. He continued, voice still calm. And you walked up like I was a joke. His eyes flicked to her mouth for a second, then back to her eyes. Like you weren't afraid. Zuri forced herself to meet his stare even as her stomach twisted. Maybe I'm not, she lied. For the first time, something shifted behind his expression. Not anger. Not amusement. Interest. The most dangerous kind. That, he said softly, is what makes you suspicious. One of his men stepped closer and murmured something in Korean, so low Zuri barely caught it. The boss answered without looking away from her. Single word. Command. The man nodded and moved. The change happened quickly after that. The front doors that had been open and welcoming a moment ago were suddenly shut. Not slammed. Sealed. Metal clicked somewhere deep in the frame. A security guard, one of the club's, not his, walked toward the doors like he'd just remembered his job. He reached for the handle. It didn't move. His face tightened. He tried again, harder, then glanced over his shoulder, confused. Zuri watched a private panic spread through the staff like a quiet infection. The bartender stopped wiping glasses. A hostess lifted a phone, then froze when she saw one of the suited men watching her. She lowered it slowly like she'd been told. Zuri's heart hammered. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice sharper now, a crack of real fear showing through. The boss didn't answer immediately. He finally released her wrist, just enough that she felt the freedom and realized it wasn't real. His hand slid to the edge of her arm, guiding her without pushing. A gesture that looked polite to anyone watching. A restraint disguised as manners. "I'm preventing a problem," he said. "Before it starts." Zuri's eyes darted around. "A problem?" He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something she couldn't hear. Then his gaze shifted past her shoulder toward the crowd. "Too many eyes," he said. "Too many phones." His voice dropped lower. "Too many people who will think you kissing me means you're protected." Zuri blinked. Protected. The word sounded wrong. Like a fantasy that didn't belong in this room anymore. His eyes returned to her. "Or claimed," he added, and something in his tone made it feel like both were a punishment. Zuri took one step back. "When?" That was all she managed before one of his men moved with her, closing the space, not touching her, just reminding her again. There was nowhere to go inside a locked room. The boss watched her reaction like he was reading a report. "You're trying to figure out if I'll hurt you," he said. "You should be trying to figure out who brought you to my table." Zuri's throat went dry. "Nobody brought me." But her voice faltered because she saw Mina across the room with her hands clasped to her mouth, eyes wide with guilt. Like she'd dared Zuri as a joke. But dared her toward the wrong death. Zuri's eyes snapped back to the boss. "Who are you?" she asked, and hated that her voice shook on the last word. His gaze sharpened, not pleased by the question. Like her not knowing was either impossible or an insult. Before he could answer, a woman brushed past Zuri's shoulder, close enough that her perfume mixed with Zuri's breath. The woman didn't look at Zuri. She didn't stop. But she whispered as she passed, voice trembling like prayer. "You kissed the wrong man." Zuri's laugh returned, but it didn't reach her eyes this time. It came out as a desperate sound, like her mouth was trying to hold the whole room together while her instincts screamed to run. "It was a joke," she said, forcing brightness into every syllable. "A stupid dare. That's all." She lifted her hands slightly in surrender, palms open. "The way you do when you don't want a man like him to think you're challenging him. I didn't mean anything by it." The boss watched her the way a storm watches a candle. Quiet, unmoved, already certain how this ends. He didn't speak. He didn't react the way normal men did. That silence made the air around him heavier. Zuri's chest tightened with the unbearable urge to fill it, to talk her way out, to explain herself into safety. "My friends," she started, glancing toward Mina again, hoping for a laugh, a wave, anything that could pull her back into normal life. Mina didn't smile. Mina couldn't even blink properly. Her face looked drained, eyes wet, like she was watching a car crash and realizing she'd been the one to loosen the brakes. The other girls stood stiff and pale, clinging to each other's sleeves. Not one of them stepped forward. Not one of them said Zuri's name. Zuri's stomach sank. So they know. They know exactly who he is. The realization hit her harder than the locked doors. It wasn't just that the bar had gone quiet. It was that the quiet belonged to him. Like the entire room had been trained to pause when he breathed. Zuri shifted her weight, trying to casually step away, and immediately felt the shape of his people adjusting with her, tightening the invisible circle without touching her. It was choreography. It was discipline. It was control so complete it didn't need violence to be felt. "You can let me go," she said, softer now. "I'll leave." "I won't." She stopped mid-sentence when she caught sight of him properly. The angle of his collar. The way his black suit jacket sat like armor. A thin line of ink rose just above the neckline, disappearing into the shadow beneath his jaw. A tattoo. Not flashy. Not decorative. Something deliberate, something earned. The kind of mark that said a man had survived a world where names got you killed and symbols kept you alive. Zuri's eyes flicked to it before she could stop herself. His gaze followed the movement instantly. "You noticed," he said, voice low. Zuri's pulse jumped. "It's hard not to," she replied, trying to make it sound like a casual observation instead of proof that her fear was growing teeth. The corner of his mouth lifted almost imperceptibly. "Most people don't look at me long enough to see details." "Maybe I'm just rude," she said, but her voice cracked on the last word. He leaned in slightly, and Zuri hated that her body didn't step back fast enough. "Or maybe," he murmured, "you were taught not to lower your eyes." Zuri swallowed. The way he said it made it feel like he wasn't guessing, like he was remembering. She forced herself to speak again, louder this time, as if volume could create distance. "Look, sorry. Crossed a line. I'm leaving now." She turned toward the doors even though she knew they were locked, even though she could feel every gaze following her like a spotlight. The humiliation burned almost as much as the fear. She didn't want to beg. She didn't want to be a story someone told later. Zuri took one step, then another. A suited man appeared in her path, not blocking her aggressively, just standing there with the polite stillness of someone who could break her in half without wrinkling his shirt. Zuri stopped. Her throat tightened. She looked back at the boss, searching for any flicker of mercy, any sign this was still a misunderstanding. His expression didn't change. That was the worst part. His calm wasn't kindness. It was decision. "You're trembling," he observed. Zuri's eyes flashed. "No, I'm not." He held her gaze. "Yes," he said softly. "You are." She hated him for being right. She hated herself more for letting him see it. She tried again, a final attempt at control. "You don't even know me," she said. "This means nothing." He took a slow sip from his glass like her words didn't deserve urgency. Then he set it down carefully, the clink quiet but final. His eyes lifted to hers again, and for the first time, something colder than curiosity slid into his gaze. Recognition. He spoke one word, calm as a verdict. "Zuri." Her breath stopped. The room blurred at the edges for a second, like her brain refused to accept what it just heard. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her name had never been said out loud tonight. Not once. Mina hadn't called her. The bartender hadn't asked. She hadn't introduced herself. Zuri stared at him, every muscle locked, every instinct screaming the same thing. Run. But her feet wouldn't move. Because if a man like him knew her name without permission, then this wasn't a dare anymore. This was a trap that had been waiting for her. He had been waiting in that bar long before her friends started laughing. Long before the music got loud enough to pretend the night was harmless. Long before Zuri's lips touched his and the entire room forgot how to breathe. The place looked like a playground to outsiders. Neon lights, expensive liquor, bodies moving like they didn't have tomorrow. But to him it was a checkpoint. Box. A controlled space with too many exits and not enough loyalty. He'd chosen it because it was predictable. Because people got careless in places like this. Because men who wanted him dead always believed a crowd could hide them. He sat where he could see everything. The doors. The windows. The bartender's hands. The security cameras angled wrong on purpose. His men weren't there for protection. They were there for timing. The air had smelled wrong from the moment he walked in. Not fear. Not greed. Intention. Someone was in position. Someone was waiting for a single mistake. And then she kissed him. Not softly. Not politely. She kissed him like she wasn't afraid of consequences. Like she had no idea consequences were sitting at that table wearing a suit and a neck tattoo like a warning. For a moment, one humiliating, dangerous moment, he felt the world tilt. Not because of desire. Desire was easy, controlled, disposable. But because her mouth on his was chaos. And chaos in his world was never an accident. His hand had already moved to her wrist, not to punish her, but to anchor her. To stop her from stepping into the next second blind. Zuri's eyes were wide now, her pride still trying to stand upright even as her fear dragged it down. His men had tightened the circle around them, silent as breath. The bar stayed frozen. The bartender kept wiping the same clean glass like repeating the motion could erase what was happening. A man at the corner table stared too hard at his drink. The kind of stare that avoided eye contact while counting seconds. The boss didn't even glance at him. He didn't need to. He already knew where the threat would come from. Never came from the loud ones. Came from the patient ones. He leaned back in his chair, lazy posture, lethal attention. Then he tilted his head slightly. A gesture so small no one would notice unless they were trained to survive him. Two of his men shifted instantly toward the kitchen door. Another moved closer to the main exit, stopping just short of touching the lock. Zuri's breath hitched as she realized the room wasn't just watching. It was being managed. Her friends stood behind the bar seating like shadows that didn't dare move. Mina's eyes met Zuri's for half a second, and then Mina looked away, the way people looked away from executions. Zuri whispered, "What is happening?" He didn't answer. Because explaining would make her panic. And panic would get her killed. His phone stayed face down on the table. He didn't need calls. He needed the sound outside. He listened past the music, past the murmurs, past Zuri's uneven breathing. The city had a pulse. He'd memorized it. And right now it stumbled. Then it happened. A sharp crack ripped through the night. Too clean to be fireworks, too controlled to be an accident. The front glass of the bar shuddered. A single bullet punched into the metal frame near the entrance, spraying sparks like angry stars. Women screamed. Chairs scraped back. The music cut out mid-beat as if someone strangled it. People ducked. Glass trembled in the hanging lights. Zuri flinched hard, instinctively throwing her hands up, and the boss moved before her fear could turn into motion. He stood so fast his chair barely made a sound. One arm hooked around Zuri's waist, yanking her backward, pulling her off the open floor and into the shield of his body. She hit his chest with a gasp, the scent of cold smoke and expensive cologne filling her lungs. His other hand came up, not holding a gun in the open. Never in the open, but positioned like he could draw one in a heartbeat. His men were already moving. Point 2 rushed toward the entrance, not to protect guests, but to control the line of sight. Another flipped a table over with brutal efficiency, creating cover. The bartender dropped flat behind the counter. Mina covered her mouth to silence her own sob. Zuri trembled so violently her knees threatened to fold. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, firm and unarguable. He lowered his mouth to her ear, voice calm enough to make it feel like the gunshot never happened. "Stay close," he murmured. His eyes tracked the windows, the shadows outside, the angles he'd already calculated. "If you want to live." Zuri didn't realize she was being moved until the air changed. One moment she was pressed against his chest, the heat of him blocking the cold panic rising in her throat. The next, the restaurant bar chaos became a tunnel of bodies and overturned chairs, and his men were creating a path like they were peeling the world open for him. She tried to look back for Mina, for the girls she came with, for anything familiar that could remind her she was still a normal woman on a normal night. But the room had stopped being normal the second the bullet kissed metal and the music died. His hand stayed locked around her wrist, not gentle, not cruel, just inevitable. "Wait, my friends," she started, but her voice broke. He didn't even turn his head. "They'll live," he said like it was a fact he'd already calculated. "You won't." That sentence hit harder than the gunshot. Zuri's feet kept moving because his world didn't leave room for hesitation. A back door swung open into an alley lit by one flickering security lamp. Rain-slick pavement reflected red and blue neon from the street, turning the ground into a bruise-colored mirror. She stumbled once, heels catching, and he steadied her without slowing down. Not because he cared about her balance, because noise drew attention. Because a fall meant stopping. And stopping meant dying. A black car waited with the engine running. No plates. Windows too dark to see the inside. Zuri froze at the sight of it, her stomach turning as if her body recognized danger before her brain did. "I'm not going in there," she whispered, pulling back. That was when his gaze finally met hers. Close up, he didn't look like a man. He looked like a verdict. A neck tattoo curved beneath his jawline, disappearing into the collar of his coat like a secret that had been carved into him. His eyes weren't angry. They were empty in the way predators could afford to be empty. "You already did," he said quietly. The door opened. 2 men stepped out. Not rough. Not loud. Just precise. Zuri felt humiliation rise in her chest. This wasn't a kidnapping scene with screaming and dragging. It was worse. It was quiet acceptance by everyone around her that she no longer belonged to herself. She took one last breath of the alley's cold air, then stepped back, trying to create distance. "This is insane," she insisted. "I kissed you. That's it. That's all. I'm leaving." The boss didn't argue. He didn't have to. He simply lifted her hand, the one he'd been gripping, and brought it closer to his face. Not as a romantic gesture. As proof. Then he turned her wrists slightly so she could see what he saw. A faint smear of blood on her skin. Not hers. The bullet had hit metal, and the sharp burst had sprayed fragments, and in the scramble someone had been cut. That tiny red line on her wrist was nothing. But in his world, blood was a signature. Scent. Reason. "You don't understand," he said, voice still calm. "That kiss wasn't a joke." Zuri swallowed hard. Her mouth felt dry. "Then what was it?" He leaned closer, his breath barely brushing her ear, and she hated herself for how her skin reacted, how her body listened even while her mind screamed. "It was permission," he whispered. "To touch me." She pulled her hand back like it burned, but the door of the car opened wider as if the vehicle itself was waiting. Inside, the leather seats were spotless. Cold. Expensive. The kind of luxury that didn't comfort. You sat in it the way you sat in a coffin lined with silk. Zuri slid in because the alley had suddenly become too exposed, too open. Because she could feel eyes on her from the darkness beyond the lamp. Because her instincts finally caught up to the truth. Someone had shot at him. And the moment she touched him, she entered the line of fire. The door shut with a final sound that felt like the world locking behind her. The boss got in beside her. Not across. Beside. Close enough that his shoulder almost touched hers. His men didn't ask where to go. The car pulled away immediately, tires whispering over wet pavement. Zuri stared out the tinted window at passing streetlights, her reflection ghosting over the glass. Her face looked the same, but she didn't feel the same. Her phone vibrated in her purse like it remembered it existed. She fumbled for it with shaking hands, praying for Mina's name, for a stupid meme, for anything normal. What popped up wasn't from a friend. It wasn't even from an unknown number. It was a notification from a private app she'd never installed. Clip. Grainy zoomed in, filmed from across the room. The moment her lips touched his. The moment the entire bar froze. Underneath it, one line of text appeared like a sentence passed in a courtroom she didn't know she'd entered. "She's his weakness." Zuri's breath caught. Her thumb hovered over the screen as if touching it would make it real. Then the boss glanced down once, saw the message reflected in her widened eyes, and the air inside the car turned colder than the rain outside. He didn't look surprised. He looked irritated, like someone had just moved a chess piece without permission. "They were waiting," he said softly. "Not for me." Zuri's throat tightened. "For me." His gaze shifted to her, and this time it wasn't empty. It was sharp, possessive, dangerous in a different way. "For whoever would be stupid enough to kiss me in public," he answered. "And now they know exactly what to use." The gates opened without a sound. Not the squeal of rust or the clank of chains, just the slow, obedient parting of steel, like the mansion itself had been trained to obey him the way men did. Zuri stared through the tinted window as the car rolled past stone pillars and a driveway so perfectly lit it looked staged. The kind of lighting meant to erase shadows, meant to make sure nothing could hide. That should have made her feel safe. Instead, it made her feel watched from every angle at once. The car stopped under a canopy. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. Zuri hesitated, gripping her purse like it was a shield, and for a second she wondered if she could bolt, run back into the dark, disappear into the streets. But the streets were no longer hers. The moment that video spread, she belonged to something else. The boss stepped out first. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't say, "Careful." He simply looked at her like time was a luxury she didn't deserve. Zuri climbed out. Her heels clicked once against the marble, and the sound was so loud in the silence that she flinched. A line of men stood near the entrance, dressed in black, faces blank. None of them looked curious. They looked trained. And what terrified her most wasn't the weapons she couldn't see. It was the way none of them looked at her like a woman. They looked at her like a package with instructions. Inside, warmth wrapped around her, thick and expensive, but it didn't soften anything. It only made the cold feel sharper by comparison. The foyer was massive, polished stone under her feet, dark wood walls, framed art that looked too old to be real. The air smelled like clean linen and something faintly metallic, like money had a scent here. Zuri's eyes caught cameras tucked into corners. Tiny red lights. Blinking. Recording. Her throat tightened. "Is this your house?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. He didn't respond immediately. He removed his coat with one smooth motion, handing it to someone who appeared out of nowhere and vanished again like a ghost. Then he finally looked at her. "This is where people disappear," he said, voice low, like he didn't care if she liked the truth. "Tonight you will be one of them." Her stomach dropped. "I'm not disappearing," she said quickly. "I have a job." "I have." She stopped. 'Cause what did she have? Mina. A rented apartment with thin walls and a door lock anyone could break. A life that could be erased with one message. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. That was the worst part. "Your job ended the second you kissed me," he said. He started walking, and Zuri's feet moved after him without permission, pulled by fear and the fact that his men didn't need to grab her for her to feel trapped. They entered a long corridor, soft lights along the baseboards, doors spaced evenly like a hotel. Except hotels wanted guests to relax. This place wanted them quiet. He stopped at one door and opened it. "Go in." Zuri stayed frozen. "Why?" He looked at her again, and something in his stare made her heart stutter. Not desire. Not anger. Calculation. "Because you're shaking," he said simply. "And I don't like mistakes." She stepped inside. The room was beautiful in a sterile way. White sheets, a fireplace already lit, a couch that looked untouched. A glass of water waited on a side table as if someone had known she'd be thirsty before she did. Zuri turned around. The boss remained in the doorway. He didn't enter. Not fully. Like he was drawing an invisible line between them. "So what now?" she demanded, forcing steel into her voice. "You keep me here. You think you can just—" "I don't think," he cut in. "I decide." Zuri's mouth opened, then closed. Anger rose, not because he was wrong, but because he didn't even care that it hurt. "I want to go home," she said, quieter now. The boss's eyes didn't change. You can't. 2 words. Simple. Final. Zuri felt her spine go cold. Can't, or won't, she whispered. He stepped closer, just enough to make her breathing hitch. Can't, he repeated. Not tonight. Not after that message. Her fingers curled around the strap of her purse until her knuckles ached. You're acting like you're protecting me, she said, voice cracking despite her effort. But you're the reason this is happening. Something flickered across his face then, so fast she almost missed it. Like a shadow passing behind his eyes. You're right, he said. And that's exactly why you're staying. He turned away, and for the first time, Zuri realized he wasn't doing this because he wanted her. He was doing it because he couldn't afford to lose her now. Not when she'd become leverage. Not when she'd become proof. He walked down the hall without another word, and she stood there listening to the quiet swallow him whole. Then she heard it. His voice. Muffled, coming from somewhere beyond the door, low and controlled. Phone call. Find out everything about her, he said. Was. The kind of pause that sounded like a decision being carved into stone. Name. Family. Every debt. Every secret. I want it before sunrise. Zuri's breath caught. She backed away from the door as if his words could reach through it and grab her. And in that moment she understood something terrifying. The danger wasn't only the enemies outside those gates. It was the fact that the most ruthless man in the city had just decided she belonged to his attention. Zuri didn't sleep. The mansion was too quiet for sleep, too perfect, like the silence had been trained the same way the guards had. Even the fire in the fireplace burned without sound, as if it knew better than to crackle in a place like this. She sat on the edge of the bed with her phone in her hand, staring at the dead signal bars like they were mocking her. No service, no way out, no proof she existed beyond these walls. A soft knock came at the door. She lifted her head. Come in, she said, voice steadier than she felt. A woman entered, older, dressed in a plain black uniform, carrying a tray. Food. A folded towel. You should eat, the woman murmured, eyes down. Zuri almost laughed. Like her whole life hadn't flipped over because of one stupid dare and a man who didn't get touched. Who are you? Zuri asked. The woman paused, then answered carefully. Staff. Do you know him? The woman's lips tightened for half a second. Everyone knows him. Zuri watched her set the tray down and leave without looking her in the eye. That told Zuri everything she needed. People didn't work here. They survived here. The moment the door clicked shut again, Zuri stood up. Her legs trembled, but she forced them steady. She crossed the room, tried the handle. She tried the second lock. Third. She pressed her forehead against the wood and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. This is insane, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Then she turned, walked to the window, and pulled the curtains back. The view should have been beautiful. A garden lit like a movie set. Trees lined like they'd been measured. Fountain in the distance. Beyond that, fences and shadows. And beyond the shadows, the city. Her city. Except it wasn't hers anymore. A movement caught her eye. A figure outside near the security gate. One of the guards, speaking into a radio, scanning the darkness like he expected it to bite him. Zuri's stomach tightened. If even the guards looked tense, what did that mean for her? Another knock came, this time slower. He didn't wait for permission. The door opened, and the boss stepped in like he owned the air itself. He wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, no tie, no jacket. The tattoo on his neck was visible now, ink curling like a warning just beneath his jawline. His gaze swept over the room once, taking inventory. The window. Lux. Or posture. You're planning to run, he said. Not a question. Zuri lifted her chin. I am running, she corrected. Right now. She walked past him toward the door with intention, with dignity, like she wasn't afraid. Like her pulse wasn't racing hard enough to bruise her ribs. She reached for the handle. It didn't move. She tried again, harder. Nothing. Zuri's jaw clenched. "Open it," she said through her teeth. "No," he replied. Zuri turned on him so fast the anger almost knocked her off balance. "Do you have any idea what you did to me?" she snapped. "One minute I'm out with my friends, the next I'm trapped in a stranger's house like I'm property. You touched me in front of witnesses," he said quietly. "You don't get to pretend you don't understand consequences." That hit harder than her fear. It wasn't a threat. It was a rule. And rules in his world weren't suggestions. Zuri took a step closer, eyes blazing. "Then tell me why you didn't kill me," she demanded. "Because I know men like you. You don't keep people around unless they're useful." He stared at her for a long moment, unreadable. Then he moved, not toward her, but past her, and leaned against the wall like this conversation was nothing more than a late-night report. "You're wrong," he said. "I don't keep people around because they're useful." Zuri's throat tightened. "Then why am I here?" His gaze finally met hers, direct and dark. "Because you're the only one in this city who did something no one has done in years." Zuri frowned. "Kissed you." He didn't smile. "Broke a pattern," he corrected. "Interrupted a plan." The air changed. Zuri's anger paused, not because it softened, but because something colder slid underneath it. "What plan?" she whispered. He pushed off the wall and walked closer, stopping close enough that she could see the faint scar along his knuckle. Close enough to feel heat in the space between them. "That bar wasn't random," he said. "That seat wasn't random. The men outside weren't random." Zuri's heart sank. "So you were waiting," she breathed. "For who?" "For the person who betrayed me years ago," he answered, voice flat. "The one who sold my location the last time someone tried to end me." Zuri's lips parted. Her mind raced, trying to connect pieces that didn't belong together. "What does that have to do with me?" His eyes narrowed slightly, like her confusion irritated him. "Because you match her," he said, each word measured. "Not your face. Not your hair. Name. Your records. Your fingerprints in places they shouldn't exist." Zuri's blood ran cold. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I've never." "I know," he cut in. "That's what makes it dangerous." Zuri stepped back until her shoulders hit the wall. "So you kidnapped me because I resemble someone?" she asked, voice shaking now despite her fight. "No," he said. "I brought you here because the moment you kissed me you became connected to me. And everyone who hates me now has a reason to use you." Zuri swallowed, forcing her eyes to stay on his. "Then let me go," she said, quieter. "If I'm such a problem, let me go." He stared at her like she was a child asking to play in traffic. "If you leave," he said, "you won't make it home." Zuri's breath caught. The room felt smaller. The locks felt louder. "So what?" she whispered. "You're my only option." His voice lowered, almost intimate, but it carried no softness. "No," he said. "I'm your last one." Zuri's eyes burned, but she refused to let tears fall in front of him. She refused to beg. She refused to fold. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said. "I didn't ask to be chosen." He stepped closer, and for the first time his control looked like it took effort. Like something inside him was pulling against its own chains. "That's the cruel part," he murmured. "You never do." Zuri stared at him, her chest rising and falling too fast. "Then why me?" she whispered. The boss leaned in just enough for his words to land like a sentence. "Because that kiss wasn't a dare," he said. "It was fate." Zuri didn't get to answer him. The word still sat between them. Fate. Heavy and ridiculous and terrifying, like a chain you didn't feel until you tried to move. The boss turned away first, not because he was done, but because his phone vibrated once and the air in the room immediately tightened. He didn't look at the screen for long. He didn't need to. His jaw hardened, and his gaze flicked toward the window like he could see through stone and night. "Stay here," he said. Zuri let out a sharp breath, bitter. "That's your favorite sentence." He looked back at her, and for a moment his expression was almost careful, like he wanted to say something softer and hated himself for wanting it. "This time," he said, voice low, "it's not control. It's survival." He stepped out and shut the door. The locks clicked in a sequence that sounded rehearsed. Zuri stood frozen, heart thundering, trying to decide if she should scream or pray or laugh at the insanity of her life. She crossed to the window again. The garden was still beautiful. That was the sickest part. Outside, guards moved in silent lines, shadows repositioning like chess pieces. A car rolled through the inner driveway without headlights, stopping near the east wing. Another followed. Then another. She watched men step out with rifles, but no one shouted. No one ran. It was calm, controlled. Like this was what their nights looked like when nothing went wrong. Zuri pressed her hand to the glass, her palm leaving a faint print. Somewhere below, a door opened. She heard it through the floor, not the walls. Like the mansion itself carried sound differently when it mattered. The next sound wasn't a gunshot. It was the softest crack. Dull thud. Like something heavy hit stone. Zuri's body reacted before her mind did. She stepped back. Then another crack. Another thud. And this time she saw it. Two guards at the far edge of the property dropping at the same time, collapsing into the grass like their bones were suddenly liquid. Zuri's mouth opened but no sound came out. Her lungs forgot how to work. Sniper. They weren't inside yet. They didn't need to be. Panic rose in her chest, sharp and acidic, and she fought it down because it would make her stupid. Stupid got you killed. The door to her room opened so fast it slammed into the wall. The boss stepped in, and the calm he wore earlier was gone. Not replaced by chaos. Replaced by something colder. Something that didn't hesitate. "Move," he ordered. Zuri stared at him. "What's happening?" "They're testing distance," he said, already crossing the room, grabbing her wrist. His grip wasn't painful, but it wasn't gentle either. It was certainty. "Come with me." "Wait, my phone." "Irrelevant," he cut in. He pulled her out into the hallway. Lights along the corridor dimmed automatically, shifting from warm gold to hard white. That alone made Zuri's stomach turn. The mansion was changing modes. He moved fast but not sloppy. As they turned a corner, Zuri saw men in black suits sliding panels aside, revealing weapons hidden in the walls like decorations. One of them glanced at her, and she caught something in his eyes that made her throat tighten. Not pity. Not judgment. Fear. Like she was a spark near gasoline. Another crack echoed. Closer this time. A chandelier in the far hallway shattered, raining glass down like glittering hail. Zuri flinched, and the boss yanked her into a side passage. "Heads down," he ordered into his earpiece. "West wing. Now." They ran through a narrow corridor lined with art that suddenly felt stupid and fragile. Zuri's shoes slipped once on polished wood and she almost went down, but his hand tightened around her wrist and kept her upright without even looking back. He didn't slow. He couldn't. The first real gunfire erupted near the back entrance. Not wild spraying. Clean. Controlled burst. Short. Finish. Then silence. Zuri realized her entire body was shaking. Her teeth chattered once, a betrayal she hated. "This is because of me," she whispered. The boss didn't answer. He dragged her into a room that looked like a library until the wall behind the shelves slid open. A hidden stairwell. Her stomach dropped. Of course he had hidden exits. Of course he had a private tunnel inside a mansion built like a fortress. As they descended, a voice crackled through his earpiece. "Boss! East perimeter breach. 2 inside." The boss stopped so suddenly Zuri almost collided into his back. His hand lifted, palm out, not for her. She wasn't the one he was stopping. It was his men behind them. He spoke calmly into the mic, "Confirm identities." The reply came after a half-second delay that felt like a lifetime. "One is ours." Zuri's blood ran cold. The boss didn't move. He didn't curse. But the air around him changed, thick with something lethal and personal. "Name," he demanded. The voice hesitated. Min Jae. Zuri didn't know who that was, but the boss's eyes flicked shut for the briefest moment, like the name cut him. When he opened them again, whatever softness he had left was gone. He looked at Zuri, and she saw it clearly now. He wasn't fighting to keep her safe anymore. He was fighting to keep himself from becoming something worse. Another message hit his ear. Boss, he's heading toward the girl. Zuri's heart slammed. The boss grabbed her and pushed her behind him, his body shielding hers without thinking. Stay behind me, he said, voice like steel. And when footsteps pounded above them, fast and wrong, Zuri understood with sick clarity that the people hunting tonight weren't coming for him anymore. They were coming for her. Zuri didn't scream when the footsteps came closer. She didn't beg either. Her body wanted to. Every muscle begged for panic, but something inside her refused to give the men above them the satisfaction of hearing fear. The boss lifted his hand, and his guards froze like statues in the dark tunnel, weapons angled upward, breathing controlled. Then the footsteps passed. Not toward them. Past them. Like the intruder had realized the stairwell was a decoy and moved to a different entrance. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was a warning. The boss exhaled through his nose once, slow, like he was counting his anger so it didn't explode too early. He turned his head slightly, listening to messages pouring into his ear. Zuri could only hear fragments. Perimeter, 2 down. Unconfirmed vehicle. Then his gaze landed on her. Not soft. Not romantic. Focused. Assessing. Like he was deciding whether she was going to survive the next hour. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Zuri laughed once, sharp and humorless. I didn't choose your house. You dragged me into it. He didn't deny it. That was the terrifying part. He stepped closer, and she felt the heat of him in the narrow space. Not warmth. Storm heat. Listen, he said. This is not a Ba problem anymore. You think I don't know that? She snapped, then stopped herself. Her voice had cracked. The fear slipped out like blood from a cut. She swallowed, forcing it back in. Tell me what's happening. He held her stare for a long second. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone she had never seen before. He tapped once. The screen lit up with a live feed. Security cameras, multiple angles, men moving through shadows, headlights cutting across the estate like knives. Zuri's chest tightened. The boss tilted the phone so she could see. They're here for you, he said. Not because you kissed me. Because you exist in the wrong place at the wrong time. Zuri's throat went dry. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense, he replied. To my enemies. Above them, another muted gunshot. One. Then two. Then the radio silence that followed, like the estate swallowed sound to keep panic from spreading. Zuri stared at him. So what now? His jaw flexed. Now I give you the only clean option you'll ever get. He nodded once to a guard behind him. The man stepped forward and opened a black case. Inside were items that didn't belong in a normal life. A passport, cash, a small phone, keys, a thin file. Zuri blinked. What is that? Your exit, the boss said. A car is waiting underground. It will take you to a private airstrip outside the city. From there you go anywhere. Europe, Africa. Somewhere no one will find you. Zuri stared at the passport. Her name wasn't on it. The face looked like her, but slightly different, like a version of her that didn't carry bruises and fear and bad decisions. You prepared this? She asked, voice low. I prepare for everything, he answered. There it was again. Control. But underneath it something else. Something almost restrained. Like he was trying to do the right thing in the only way he knew. Zuri's fingers hovered over the passport, then stopped. So I become a ghost. You stay alive, he corrected. You disappear tonight and they stop hunting you tomorrow. Zuri looked up. And you? His eyes didn't flinch. I stay. I finish what started. That word, finish, made her stomach twist. Because she knew what it meant when a man like him said it. She stepped back from the case like it was poison. No, she said. The boss's gaze sharpened. Don't be foolish. Don't call me foolish, Zuri snapped, the anger surprising even her. I've been hiding my whole life. From landlords. From hunger. From men who think fear makes them kings. I'm done. He stared at her, expression unreadable. You want to die with pride. I want to live with dignity, she shot back. There's a difference. Silence stretched. Heavy. Dangerous. The boss's voice dropped when he finally spoke. If you stay, they will use you against me. Zuri lifted her chin, even though her knees felt weak. Then stop acting like I'm something to be used. He stepped closer. You don't understand what you are. Then explain it, she whispered. The boss's eyes held hers like a grip. You're my weakness now. Zuri's breath caught. Not because it sounded romantic. 'Cause it sounded like a death sentence. She forced her voice steady. Then let me be your choice, not your mistake. The boss didn't move for a long second. Then he nodded once, slow, like he was accepting something he didn't want to accept. Fine, he said. If you refuse to run, you do it my way. Zuri didn't blink. Public, she answered. No hiding. No secret rooms. No disappearing like shame. The boss's mouth tightened slightly, but his eyes burned with something close to respect. You want the city to see you beside me, he murmured. You want them to know you're not prey. Yes, Zuri said. And you want them to know you don't own me. That was the moment the rules of the war changed. Not with bullets. With a woman refusing to vanish. The boss lifted his hand, speaking into his earpiece. Prepare the convoy. We're going out. One of the guards stiffened. Boss, outside is compromised. I know, he cut in. That's why we go now. Zuri's pulse thundered as they moved up another stairwell, emerging into a different wing of the mansion where the lights were bright and cruel. He didn't hide her. He didn't shove her behind him. He walked beside her, shoulder to shoulder, as if daring the world to try. When they stepped into the open driveway, cameras from across the street caught them immediately. Zuri felt it. The gaze of the city. The hunger of the internet. The danger of attention. The boss didn't even flinch. His phone vibrated once. He glanced at the message and his expression turned flat, cold, lethal. He showed Zuri the screen. 3 words. Final offer. Trade her, or lose the city. The message stayed on his screen for only a second, but it changed the air around them. Trade her, or lose the city. Zuri read it twice, like the words might rearrange themselves into something less final. The boss didn't swear. He didn't raise his voice. He just slid the phone into his pocket and looked at the street the way storms look at coastlines. Get in the car, he told her. Zuri didn't move. Her hands were shaking, but her spine stayed straight. I'm not something you hand over, she said. His eyes flicked to her face, and for the first time since the bar, she saw a crack in him. Not fear. Not panic. Something worse. Regret. Like he was replaying that kiss in his mind and realizing it wasn't just a mistake. It was a key turning in a lock. I know, he answered quietly. That's why they chose you. The convoy rolled out like a shadow moving through Seoul. Black vehicles, tinted windows, no sirens, no noise. The city didn't know what was inside those cars, but it felt it anyway. People on sidewalks paused without understanding why. Taxi drivers slowed. A couple laughing outside a convenience store stopped mid-sentence. Zuri sat beside him in the back seat, the leather cold under her palms, her heart beating so hard it felt like she might bruise from the inside. His men kept their faces forward, scanning mirrors, scanning rooftops, scanning everything that could hide death. Zuri's phone had been taken hours ago. Her name had already been searched. Her face had already been saved. Somewhere, someone had watched a video of her laughing in a bar, and decided that laughter would be the last thing she ever deserved. Where are we going? She asked. The boss didn't look away from the windshield. To end it. End it how? His jaw flexed once. The way my world ends things. Zuri swallowed. She wanted to say she didn't want blood on her life. But the truth was uglier. Blood had already touched her the moment she kissed him. It just hadn't shown on her skin yet. The convoy turned into an underground entrance beneath a corporate building that looked harmless above ground. Glass, clean lights, security badges. Down here it was different. Steel doors. Quiet men. A hallway that smelled like cold air and metal. Zuri followed him through it, her footsteps too loud, her breathing too fast. At the end, a room opened like a secret. Monitors lined one wall. Names and locations scrolled across screens. The boss stood in front of it, all like it belonged to him, like the city was just another weapon he knew how to hold. A man stepped forward. Older, expensive suit, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "You're making a mistake," the man said in Korean. "You can still trade her and keep peace." Zuri didn't understand every word, but she understood the tone. Bargaining. Ownership. Disposal. The boss's gaze didn't change. "Peace," he repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Then he glanced at Zuri. "Do you know what peace is in my world?" Zuri met his eyes. "A lie that lasts until someone gets greedy." For a moment, something almost approving flickered in his expression. He turned back to the man. "I won't trade her," he said. The man's smile slipped. "Then you'll lose everything." The boss took one step closer, calm as a knife laid on silk. "I already lost everything the day I let myself feel anything." The room went quiet. The older man's throat bobbed. Zuri felt her pulse climb. She realized, too late, that this wasn't a negotiation. It was a funeral that just hadn't started screaming yet. The boss lifted his hand, and his right-hand man moved like instinct, placing a folder on the table, sliding photos out like cards. Evidence. Meetings. Payments. Men in suits shaking hands with men in shadows. Zuri's stomach turned as she recognized the bar's security footage. The angle of her kiss, the way it had become a mark. The older man's face hardened. "You can't prove anything," he snapped. The boss leaned forward slightly. "I don't need to prove it," he said. "I just need the city to believe it." Zuri's breath caught. That was when she understood what he meant by ending things. He wasn't going to kill one enemy. He was going to erase their ability to exist. A message came in on the monitors. Alerts, breaking headlines, police movements, sudden raids. It happened too fast to feel real. The world outside was still buying coffee, still kissing goodnight, still pretending life was safe. Meanwhile, inside this room, a man was rewriting the rules of survival. The boss's phone buzzed again. He read it once. Then, without hesitation, he deleted the message thread like it never mattered. "It's done," he said. The older man's eyes widened. "What did you do?" The boss straightened his cuffs, expression blank. "I reminded the city who it belongs to." By the time dawn bled into the skyline, the streets were full of whispers. Not loud ones. The kind that travel faster because they're afraid to be heard. Politician resigned. Prosecutor vanished. A nightclub owner locked his doors and fled the country. A rival family's emblem was taken down from a building like someone had stripped a flag off a conquered wall. And on every screen in the city, for exactly 12 seconds, a warning appeared before it was wiped clean. No logo. No signature. Just a sentence that made even powerful men check their locks twice. Zuri watched it from a balcony in his mansion, wrapped in a coat that wasn't hers, staring at a sunrise that felt colder than night. She expected to feel safe. Instead she felt emptied out, like her old life had been scooped away and replaced with silence. The boss stepped beside her. Not touching. Not claiming. Just standing close enough that she could feel the heat of what he was. "You're alive," he said. Zuri let out a breath that shook. "And I don't know what I am anymore." He didn't answer right away. He looked out at the city like it was a battlefield he'd won but couldn't leave. "You'll never be normal again," he said quietly. Zuri's eyes stung, but she refused to cry. "Neither will you." That was the truth that hurt more than any threat. He'd won. The enemy was gone. The city had bowed. And yet his shoulders stayed tense, like he was still waiting for a bullet that already missed. Zuri turned her face toward the morning. Somewhere behind her, her friends would wake up and talk about the wild night at the bar. Somewhere, someone would replay the video of her kiss like it was gossip, not realizing it was a beginning. She swallowed, tasting the bitter edge of survival. She kissed him for a dare. But by morning, she understood the truth. In his world, one kiss isn't affection. It's a sentence.